Erica at the Columbus Public Library, and welcome to Voter Education, Part 5, Student Voter Guide. Today we'll be covering the presidential candidates, does your vote matter, issues that impact young voters, candidate stances on the issues, and resources to keep yourself informed. There will also be a bibliography at the end of the presentation for all the information cited throughout it, and additional resources if you want to do extra research. So, who are the presidential candidates in the November election coming up? The first is Donald Trump, who is currently the president. The vice president, who would be his running mate, Mike Pence. And he's part of the Republican Party. He's running against Joe Biden, whose running mate is Kamala Harris, and their party is Democrat. Joe Biden, the 2020 Democratic presidential nominee. Joe Biden, who was the former vice president under President Obama, is the official Democratic presidential nominee for the 2020 election. From 1973 to 2009, Biden served as a U.S. Senator for Delaware before becoming vice president to former President Barack Obama. Joe Biden recently selected Senator Kamala Harris of California as his vice presidential running mate. Senator Harris is the first woman of color to serve on a major presidential ticket. Biden and Harris are running on the Democratic platform against President Donald Trump and Vice President Mike Pence. Donald Trump, the 45th President of the United States. U.S. President Donald Trump is running for re-election in 2020. While the president has been officially running for re-election since his inauguration, Republican delegates formally nominated President Trump for a second term in office at the Republican National Convention. Mike Pence, the current vice president and previous member of the U.S. House of Representatives, was also formally renominated as his running mate. In a time of crisis, President Trump will run against Democratic presidential nominee Joe Biden. Though you might not realize it yet, your vote as a young person can bring about change. More than ever before, young people are poised to make an impact. As of this year, 1 in 10 eligible voters belong to Generation Z, and millennials now match baby boomers as the largest share of the American electorate. Data from the 2018 midterms also shows that young people ages 18 to 29 are starting to vote in larger numbers, up 16 percentage points since 2014. Midterm voter turnout reached a modern high in 2018, and Generation Z, Millennials, and Generation X account for a narrow majority of those voters, according to a Pew Research Center analysis of newly available Census Bureau data. Here are 3 charts that show some interesting trends among young voters. Particularly the third chart, the one that says younger generations make up increasing shares of U.S. House. As young voter turnout increases, representation in the House is also showing that. This chart shows the generational composition of the 116th U.S. Congress. Even though Gen Z and the millennials are the largest share of the voter electorate, they actually make up the smallest share in Congress. And this is why your vote definitely matters, because if you want your voice to be represented, you need to vote for representatives that will reflect your views. Issues that impact young voters. Today we're going to discuss education, the economy, climate change, immigration, and social justice. While there are many other issues, these are just the 5 that we're going to focus on today since they are getting so much attention at this particular moment. However, I definitely encourage everyone to use the resources page to look at candidates' positions on other issues. Education. As of 2019, more than 44 million Americans collectively owed approximately $1.5 trillion in federal student loan debt. Among those with outstanding student loans, 1 in 5 are behind on their payments. Young college graduates with student loans are more likely than those without loans to report struggling financially. While there are many factors contributing to the student debt crisis, the primary reason is the rising cost of education. Joe Biden on education. He supports tuition-free college, expanding the eligibility of low-income and middle-class students for Pell Grants, an income-based repayment plan for federal student loans, student loan forgiveness after 20 years of responsibly made payments, public servant loan forgiveness, and he intends to crack down on for-profit schools. And he also supports historically black colleges and universities and minority-serving institutions. He wants to invest in community college, and he also wants to take action against private lenders who are profiting off of students. Donald Trump on education. The president's campaign website does not provide information about higher education policies. Trump appointed Secretary of Education, Betsy DeVos, however, has passed higher education initiatives that affect college tuition, private education, and student loans. The president states that he supports additional funding for private K-12 schools and that he opposes regulations meant to protect students for-profit colleges' predatory practices. He supports a single student loan income-based repayment plan, and he opposes student loan forgiveness. The economy. Millions of Americans are unemployed as a direct result of COVID-19. U.S. jobs report from the Labor Department is expected to show U.S. employers shed nearly 30 million positions from payrolls last spring as a result of the coronavirus pandemic. 1 in 4 adults have had trouble paying their bills since the coronavirus outbreak started. A third have dipped into savings or retirement accounts to make ends meet, and about 1 in 6 have borrowed money from friends or family or gotten food from a food bank. This is especially important to recent graduates, as they are entering a very competitive job market at a time when the U.S. is losing jobs, and they may have student loans they need to start paying. Joe Biden on the economy. He supports higher wages and stronger benefits, and boosting unemployment benefits, and supports a new tax increase on high-income earners and corporations. He wants to revitalize the middle class and small businesses, and intends to create millions of U.S. jobs in education, manufacturing, and technology. He pledges to provide immediate relief to working families and small businesses impacted by COVID-19. He intends to consider a second round of stimulus checks, and he intends to create jobs aimed at fighting the pandemic. And he wants to increase capital resources and financial support for minority-owned businesses. Donald Trump on the economy. Donald Trump supports opening up America again, including schools. He supports another stimulus package that includes a second round of checks. He supports tax cuts for businesses and high-income households, as well as a more simple tax code. He wants to expand into new markets for manufacturers and small businesses. He supports legislation that includes $1 trillion in infrastructure spending to create jobs. He supports the extension of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, and he opposes federal minimum wage increases, believing it should be decided at the state level. Climate change and the environment. According to the scientific consensus, annual average temperature over the United States has increased by 1.8 degrees Fahrenheit over the period from 1901 to 2016. Over the next few decades, 2021 to 2050 roughly, annual average temperatures are expected to rise by about 2.5 degrees Fahrenheit for the United States. Relative to the recent past, under all plausible future climate scenarios. Heat waves have become more frequent in the United States since the 1960s, whereas extreme cold temperatures and cold waves have become less frequent. Recent record-setting warm years are projected to become common in the near future for the United States as annual average temperatures continue to rise. Climate change has far-reaching consequences for all people, but it is especially an issue that affects younger people since the emissions put into the atmosphere now will have a long-lasting impact for generations to come. Biden on climate change and the environment. Biden plans to implement several initiatives to try and protect the environment from the threats of climate change. He also intends to use the Green New Deal as a framework for addressing environmental challenges. He supports legislation that invests in sustainable infrastructure and clean energy, and he wants to integrate climate change initiatives into U.S. foreign policy, tackling the issue globally. He supports the Clean Air Act, and he supports the conservation of U.S. land and waters and protecting biodiversity, including efforts to reduce drilling. He supports protections for the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge and intends to establish the Advanced Research Projects Agency for Climate Research. And he supports taxes on carbon emissions. Trump on climate change and the environment. President Trump does not provide any policies on his campaign website that address global warming. Since entering office, the president has reversed many policies designed to protect and preserve the environment. He opposes climate change efforts and initiatives, and he supports extending the use of fossil fuels. He opposes Obama-era energy and environmental regulation efforts, and opposes the Clean Power Plan. He opposes legislation that limits carbon emissions, and he supports legislation that allows for oil and gas drilling in new public areas. He supports offshore drilling in nearly all U.S. waters, and he supports drilling in Alaska's Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. Immigration. According to University of Chicago's Gen Forward project, more than 75% of millennials of all races support a pathway to citizenship for DACA-eligible individuals. Gen Z are more likely to be children of immigrants. 22% of Gen Zers have at least one immigrant parent. When President Trump first took office, conversations around immigration focused almost entirely on the construction of a border wall to define the United States southern border. Today, with border wall construction slowed, topics relating to DACA and immigration detention facilities are on the forefront of election issues. Biden on immigration. He supports the DACA and DAPA programs, and he supports the Central American Minors Program, as well as opposing the Migrant Protection Protocols. He pledges to reinforce the Flores Agreement, which requires fair care and treatment standards for immigrant detention centers, and he opposes the construction of a border wall, and supports rescinding the Muslim bans. Trump on immigration. Upon his inauguration, President Trump promised to build a border wall between the United States and Mexico. Along with plans to complete this initiative, he also intends to keep forcibly removing undocumented immigrants by using ICE. He supports the construction of a border wall between the U.S. and Mexico and plans to end chain migration. He wants to eliminate the visa lottery, and he supports a merit-based immigration entry system. Social justice. On May 25, 2020, George Floyd was arrested for using a counterfeit $20 bill. After this, a police officer named Derek Chauvin pressed his knee on Floyd's neck for over 8 minutes, which resulted in his death. This sparked nationwide protests to address issues of social inequality within minority communities and police reform. According to the Pew Research Center, only 19% of Americans believe Trump has made progress towards improving race relations since taking office in 2016. Biden on social justice. He pledges to eliminate policies that enhance racial disparities, and he plans to tackle systemic police misconduct with the help of the U.S. Department of Justice. He pledges to reduce federal spending on incarceration and reinvest funds back into impacted communities. He wants to provide redemption and rehabilitation opportunities to incarcerated individuals. And he plans to tackle institutional racism by investing in educational opportunities for all. He wants to fund initiatives that partner social workers with law enforcement officers, and he supports the Safe Justice Act. He wants to eliminate capital punishment. Trump on social justice. While many Americans believe Trump has worsened race relations, Trump has expressed some support for legislation that addresses police reform. Additionally, he has made steps towards criminal justice reform. He supports safe policing for safe communities. He supports the First Step Act, and he supports the use of capital punishment. What resources can I use to keep myself informed? The first one we're going to talk about is Issue Voter. So how does it work? You receive alerts before bills pass, and then you choose the issues you care about and get alerts about relevant new bills. Issue Voter summarizes them and offers pros and cons and related news for context, keeping you informed year-round. Then you can send your opinion directly to your representative. With one click, you let your representative know how you want them to vote on bills without you having to pick up the phone or mail them a letter. You track your representative's votes and bill outcomes. Your private profile tracks how often your elected officials vote your way, keeping politicians accountable and helping you make an informed decision at election time. So when you go to try it out, you'll get something that looks like this. If you notice at the top, it'll have the titles of the particular bills that are being discussed in Congress at that moment. So the first one, the Clean Economy, Jobs and Innovation Act, that bill has already passed, and you can see that with the little green check mark that says passed. But the one next to it, the Uyghur Forced Labor Disclosure Act of 2020, Congress is still waiting to discuss and vote on that bill. Below that, you have the option to either oppose or support it, and then below that, it tells you the type of act that it is. So the Clean Economy, Jobs and Innovation Act, that's environmental and energy, while the Uyghur Forced Labor Disclosure Act deals with foreign affairs and relations. The second resource is Vote 411. It was launched by the League of Women Voters Education Fund in October of 2006. Vote411.org is a one-stop shop for election-related information. It provides nonpartisan information to the public with both general and state-specific information on the following aspects of the election process: absentee ballot information, ballot measure information, early voting options, election dates, factual data on candidates in various federal, state, and local races, general information on such topics as how to watch debates with a critical eye, and much more. When you go to try it out, it'll first ask you to enter your personal information. So you'll enter your street address, city, state, and zip code. After that, you're going to get a personalized dashboard that gives you upcoming election and registration dates. So in my case, for the Tuesday, November 3rd, 2020 general election, I have a registration deadline of Monday, October 5th, 2020, but it's going to vary depending on where you live. But then you also have the option to find out what's on your ballot, so go ahead and click there. After you click on the Find Out What's on Your Ballot option, you can compare candidates in different elections. So in this case, it gives me all the candidates for the presidential election. So if I wanted to compare Joe Biden with Donald Trump, I would just choose Joe Biden and then hit the compare button with Donald Trump. The third resource is called Fact Check. They are a nonpartisan, nonprofit consumer advocate for voters that aims to reduce the level of deception and confusion in U.S. politics. They monitor the factual accuracy of what is said by major U.S. political players in the form of TV ads, debates, speeches, interviews, and news releases. Their goal is to apply the best practices of both journalism and scholarship, and to increase public knowledge and understanding. FactCheck.org is a project of the Annenberg Public Policy Center of the University of Pennsylvania. So let's say you wanted to check the accuracy of each presidential candidate's statements during the debate. You would just search for that on their website, and as you can see, there's a video called The First Debate. And as it says in this video, FactCheck will review 6 claims that they fact-checked in the first presidential debate between President Donald Trump and Democratic presidential nominee Joe Biden. Any extra information not cited in the bibliography should be in the additional resources. This is a compiled list of articles, and policy explanations for more in-depth information on the topics discussed.